Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is September 10th, 2024, and you are listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. And today we're coming to you to talk about all the stuff that came out of the Apple event yesterday. And look, there was a lot of repeat. It was definitely the Apple event that we've all come to know and maybe not love. We'll talk about that in a second and get our feedback. But to tell you who we have today to give you that feedback, we have Jimmy, Beth, Andy, and I'm Brian. And I'll kind of kick this off by just saying that, like, boy, man, are they always 2 hours? First of all, they probably are, but I found it. I will say this, because I was personally invested in the Apple Intelligence part of it. I agree. I admit, man, oh man, did it take a while to get through all the other stuff. And I think the Apple Watch is cool. My wife has one. I don't know if you guys have an Apple Watch or not. It's not something I have, obviously. But it just took a while to get to what I was considered to be the good stuff. And then once we did get to the good stuff, I'm not sure that we learned a ton more. So that's just my quick overview, but I'd love to get your guys' overview too. Like so I think Jimmy and Beth, I don't know, Andy, if were you in it as well? Did you guys all do, I know you guys did like a feedback together. Were you all together on that? I know I wasn't there, obviously.
I was in and out, but I did listen to the event while walking around out here.
So you guys were kind of like either in or out or actually having conversations while this was going live. I wasn't able to do that with you guys. So what was the general conversation like in the group as far as the event? I don't know. Jimmy, let me go to you.
Yeah. So overall, I think, like you said, it is a very Apple event. They followed their format, their formula, and there wasn't anything new or surprising in that sense. They definitely used the hook system, where it's like, hey, here's this Apple Intelligence stuff. Don't worry, that's at hour and a half into the video, things like that. But overall, it was their opportunity to talk about their various new hardware releases, like you said, the watch and the new iPhone and the iPhone models and things like that. But for the Apple Intelligence and the AI part, it really was just like an update, right? If we're just taking an overview, it's here's the stuff we talked about earlier, and here's some specifics on how we're releasing it and where we're releasing it. So I suppose that is good information. So we know what countries they're going to roll out in initially. And of course, US, UK, there's going to be Canada. And because all of the Apple Intelligence stuff for their initial release is all going to be English-based, right? So if it's a country that's primarily English-speaking, that's probably where they're rolling it out first. Other than that, it was a lot of talk about integration with the new hardware and things like that. But that's about it. Oh, except for the visual intelligence. I think that was the one piece that was new from the previous announcement. And that functions like Google Lens. That functions not so much AR, but more cognitive of your area, so you can take a picture of something, sort of like image recognition in ChatGPT and other things like that. So you can get relevant information from there. But that's basically the AI stuff that I gleaned from it. But but the review part was fun, because we got to hang out, and particularly Carl and I got to just analyzed their entire production process. So that was personally fun. But we like to MST3K this and do our reaction and those kinds of things. So that was
I was going to say too, Jimmy, I think it's probably fair to point out that there is AI and has been AI, and part of it, Apple, just like many large companies, Samsung, Google, Pixels, all that, it's probably more in the machine learning side of things. But we should at least point out that, they did, I believe this is all new, the stuff with the earpods, which I've never owned, but that's because I have small eardrums and they just fall out. And so it's more of a like form-fitting thing. So I was kind of laughing when they're like, we've analyzed over 3 billion ear canals. I'm like, not mine. not mine, because it doesn't, you did not build something that fits me. I would love something squishy on the end of it that goes pop and keeps it there. But what I will say is something so I just recently had my hearing checked, right? Because I was having issues with my right eardrum. As part of that, did a hearing check and passed with flying colors. Pretty proud of that in my 40s, that I still have really good hearing, because the eyes not so much. But one of the things that comes out of this, she said, "Oh, the lady who was doing the test said, she goes, do you have trouble in loud environments?" And I'm like, oh my God, yes. My entire life, I've been that person. If I sit at a dinner table with my wife and we go to a loud restaurant where it's not like everybody's not whispering, it's just a restaurant. And one of our favorite ones in town is kind of like this. It's just loud, and her and about every other person, it seems like at every other table, sounds the same to me. So it's not, I don't have a hearing loss. I have a hearing like, hey, I need my ears to be like block, focus. And so what I did hear from them that I got a little excited about, and I'm gonna say this is fine to talk about on the show because it is AI, is the hearing aid and the hearing assistance that they're having built in. And the reason I say that's got to be more machine learning AI is because they said it would adjust to your environment, it would adjust to your needs, and then it would work across platform into things like if I turned on Spotify and it had done that analysis of my hearing test, it would apply those settings. Maybe it's going to boost the bass a little bit, or it's going to bring in the treble a little bit. I found that really, really fascinating. And I would have to go test them and see if they stayed in my ears. But I will tell you, just for the sake of putting one in my ear to sit at dinner to be able to hear my wife right across the table and not everybody else. They didn't say it could do that, by the way, but if it could and do like the passive thing, that would be pretty cool. So I know I kind of jumped off topic there, but you did. I just wanted to make sure we say there are other
you highlighted a great thing that they were talking about, a lot of their machine learning stuff. So AI in the back end.
Yeah.
So I think it's important, if you want to understand where machine learning, where AI is integrated on the hardware level, or in your day-to-day systems. A lot of it has to do with detection and analysis, right? And so along the lines of the hearing aid quality, that was a big a big title they put onto their new AirPods tech. Is in their watch, they highlighted one of the new health features, which was to detect possible sleep apnea.
Yep.
And so, and the way it does that is through detecting your breathing patterns when you're asleep, and analyzing, and analyzing all of those times where you might be having an apnea moment, and then and then notifying you about that. So I think that's always been the focus for the watches. So all of that kind of tech
Health tech.
All of that health tech is machine learning. That's where all of that analysis comes from, is that tech in the background, and then providing you some insights or help or anything like that. So I think highlighting the hearing aid part was is super important, because that is an AI feature.
And what they while they may not have said what you were excited about, that restaurant thing where you could dial in and listen to a particular voice in the hearing aid part, they did talk about it in the filming part. And I think that it makes sense to me that that's the same machine learning, right? That's the same tech. You've identified, there were two.
Where it was focusing at the people at the bar.
Yep. There were two options that they looked at. One was, June, you should probably say this, but I think it was called cinematic, where the speakers that you wanted to hear were louder and the background was still present. Or something that I don't know if they named it, but where the background was basically muted and the speakers were highlighted and sounded like normalized, so that they were speaking at the same level.
Yeah, you're right. It's the same tech.
Yeah, it's super exciting for me, because that isolating each of those ranges of sound would normally require recording from multiple sources, right? So you would want a mic that's set up just to pick up your ambient. then you'd want a mic set up just to pick up your foreground character.
Mhm.
And then you'd want another one to pick up your background character. And the fact that the new iPhone has, I believe it's like 4 different microphones, spatial microphones built in, so that it can pick up all of those different ranges. And yes, recognizing where that is and isolating the sound, that's absolutely an AI process.
Sure.
And then their other feature where they talked about recording, the example they used was someone laying down a vocal track and
Mhm.
someone putting in a like guitar loop, right? And I know we got a little excited on that one, so I'll let Beth talk more about that. But it allows you to basically do basic stems, right? Have different tracks.
Yeah, I was super excited. I mean, I would hope that they would let us do a little bit more than the 2 tracks, or maybe like once you have something you like, you can bounce it down, which just means you merge what you just laid over it so that now it's 1 track. It's
Mhm.
like you've reduced the 2 tracks to 1, so you now have 1 empty, right? This, if you drive in the car and you have a musical idea and you turn on voice memo and then you're like, "Oh man, like now now I have harmony. Now I wanna do something with it." This is so good. They used to have something called music memos,
Yep.
which never really, like, took off in my opinion, and I don't even know if it's still there because I don't use it. But this was very exciting. The other thing, call me mundane, but I love the idea that voice memo is going to give me a transcription,
Yeah.
right?
That's huge.
People leaving voicemail gives me a transcription. So I feel like, come on, people, let's grab this. And that I find that really, really exciting. I use voice memo a lot because while I can use ChatGPT or Perplexity and those kinds of things to talk, again, I apparently am only creative in the car, but when I'm driving in the car, I am alone and with my thoughts, and I tend to talk about stuff, but both Perplexity and ChatGPT will cut you off after a certain amount of time. So if I have something that I really just need to talk out and talk through, I use voice memo. Then I have to remember to grab it, put it somewhere, and make a transcription. I already have an automation. Don't come at me. That's just not something that was working for me.
It
So
does
if
it
it could
reminds
all
me of
happen.
4 tracks, you know,
Yeah.
like where you would merge down in order to use more than 4
Yes.
tracks. You know, you're doing it with the cassette tape, and you're like, "All right, combine those 2 and then keep going." So it kinda does what you're saying kinda reminds me of, like, sorta old school playing with cassette tapes and using, your blue boxes, you know?
Yeah, and 4 Tracks was an app that I used all the time when I was an Android person.
Yeah.
But, there isn't really an equivalent that is that car friendly, on the iPhone. If I'm wrong, please leave a comment. I would be happy to check some stuff out.
Hey,
Yeah.
we do I'm sorry, go ahead, Beth. Did you have one more thing?
Nope, I was gonna
Okay, I was
pass
gonna
it.
say we do have Carl here and Andy, and I want to get, welcome Carl. Andy, I want to get your, just overall thoughts first. And then what I'm hoping is after that, and Carl as well. Um, let's talk a little bit about like get into like the Sora side of things, or Sora Siri side of things. I think about what I was saying there. Siri side of things. Because I do want to talk about Ethan Malik and what he had access to a little while ago and his experience with it. So we can dive into that a little bit later. But first, let's get over to Andy. You haven't had really an opportunity here. Andy, overall, I'm not sure what your expectations were going in. So let's maybe hear about that and then like what you thought about the event as a whole.
Yeah. So, the Apple Glowtime event is really a product advertisement of an entire ecosystem of personal portable technologies. And they also have computing at the desktop and on laptops. But the iPhone series itself is now a very, very powerful computer. And a lot of yesterday's show was about the iPhone 16 and the A18 chip that's inside it that empowers the Apple Intelligence thing. First thing I wanted to say is a little bit of historical perspective. I was around at the time when the first kind of personal portable technology came onto the scene. and it was from a major consumer products technology company that's kind of on the sidelines now compared to the major players, and that was Sony. And it was the Sony Walkman. That was the very first time that you could go around, and it was a pretty big device. It was about, I don't know, 7 or 8 inches tall and 4 or 5 inches wide in the first versions to house that cassette. But you could have headphones on, wired to that Walkman, and you could listen to music while you were moving around. That went way beyond the little earbud speaker from a transistor radio, and gave you stereo, musical quality, portability. Now, why I mention that is that what I saw yesterday, and which was really apparent to me, was how rich an ecosystem of personal portable technology is becoming wearable in the Apple system. Now you've got the watch on your hand with motion tracking and multiple other sensors connected to your iPhone, which also has motion tracking and a powerful processor, way bigger than what's available on the wrist, that can do AI integration along with the earbuds that are communicating to all of that. And I predict eventually they'll also have wearable cameras as on eyeglass frames. Okay, Apple adds that, and now suddenly I am a wearable computer. Like every limb of my movement is being tracked by Apple, and you can see where Apple, with its enormous installed base of users and its emerging ecosystem of various devices, is the best distribution platform for AI you can imagine, right? So I really see all of those things being integrated by the artificial intelligence that's being built now into the iPhones, and so that's a really impressive thing. I mean, I believe strongly in the Apple ecosystem's ability to weave all these things together in seamless ways using AI. And so I think that's the sort of unspoken story about Apple intelligence and Apple AI. You're going to see all these things working together. By the way, it was a big pitch session for trying to get the migration of users who have earlier versions of iPhones to upgrade to the iPhone 16. And they never mentioned it for that reason of their motivation there. But if you have an iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max, then when Apple Intelligence is inserted into iOS 18, which is coming out later this year, you will also be able to use Apple Intelligence. You won't need to buy the Apple A18 chip because you've got an A17 chip in your phone.
So it's interesting you mentioned the wearables, Andy, because one of the comments that I saw online after generally people felt that this was an underwhelming presentation. I am relatively new to paying attention to what people think after Apple presentations, so maybe that's always what people think, but we still stand in line and pre-order the new thing and all that kind of stuff. But one of the comments that was made wasn't there supposed to be a ring, and the ring was rumored to be a health thing, right? So it was gonna be something that it was gonna be a wearable. It was gonna be something that you could wear that would give you feedback and all that kind of stuff. And no, there was not a ring, was not even mentioned as a ring. Carl, what did you think?
Forgive me if my computer's doing that little weird cutting in and out, so if I get cut off, just get cut off. When we talk about wearables, it's funny because I remember I saw this other article about I think it was Zuckerberg and somebody else. I can't remember who. They were trying to go for earbuds or earphones, and it's funny that Apple comes in and says, well, we got these, the Apple AirPods, we're going to upgrade them with intelligence, but now they can be turned into hearing aids, which I thought was kind of neat. I've downloaded iOS beta, the iOS 18.12 or 3 beta on my phone because I have the iPhone 15. So I have been using some of that stuff. The writing stuff, Not really. I guess I could. I don't know. I don't normally do. I guess it would be useful, but I just haven't integrated it into my habits. I've used Siri a little bit more, but I'm not sure what to use it for necessarily because I'm not sure what's in the beta. They just keep telling me to download. Here's the next version. Here's the next version. Here's the next version. And I think they've rolled out the features slowly. So 18.1 had these set of betas, these set of features, to these set of features, these set of features. So I think over the next, couple weeks, we'll probably get a little bit more. I found Siri definitely much better than old Siri, but when I say much better, we're starting at very ground level. So 10% better from 0 is, I guess, okay. It's just, I know when I saw it, they're trying to take the perplexity route, but I still use perplexity. I find perplexity just much better from a voice perspective at the moment. So I don't know if they'll connect it to their, like, I don't know how that'll work with ChatGPT camera and how they want to take a picture and you're gonna, do all that. Again, you can kind of do that with all the other models. So I don't know if they're using, I don't know if any of you caught, are they using OpenAI or are they using their own tech, their own models when you're doing the camera stuff? I'm not sure.
The language model on the phone obviously is
Apple.
fairly small, right? It's Apple and it's fairly small. So I'm not sure if it goes beyond that. I'm thinking if it gets into like, hey, what's this restaurant? Then it's probably going to have to lean on a larger model to take that picture. So remember, they showed people saying like, "Oh, remember this restaurant," or "What's on their menu," and these kind of things.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
might just be a simple OCR. It gets translated and then that information is fed
Yeah.
into like a Apple Maps or whatever, and then it just brings that information up. That doesn't necessarily need a ChatGPT, but this is something I definitely wanted to get into more when you're done. What Ethan Mollick talked about, because he talked about that distinction between what you can do with Siri on the phone and at what point you need to bounce to get to the ChatGPT level. And he talked about the pros and cons and what they had to give up in order to do, hit their security standards and things like that. So, but
Yeah.
I don't want to stop you from when you were kind of giving us our overview, but that's something we should definitely talk about.
There's one more thing I want to point out here too is when we're talking about Apple, I know they mentioned ChatGPT and they mentioned their cloud private compute. They spent quite a bit of time on that. So obviously they really want to hit the privacy aspect of it. Although if you really get down into the nitty gritty, I would imagine they would be using OpenAI's API, which OpenAI doesn't train on already. So fascinating how they position their cloud compute, but I also think it's against their training models too. So I'm curious what that kind of looks like. And finally, the latency, because that's an Apple video. I think throughout the entire presentation, I thought instead of when Tim Cook or whoever else was speaking, they interspersed it with these like slick videos for 30 seconds, 20 seconds. It'd been really awesome is actually a UCG video of somebody using it, not produced, but actually like someone in the wild, just like, hey, this is how I did it. That would be so much more impactful than like a highly produced one.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Like watching, even though it was a long time ago and we didn't see some of this for a while, but when they did their dev day at OpenAI and they were just sitting in that, it was the stage, but they were sitting in that living room setting and he was literally using it and it was like getting ahead of him. Remember, he's like, wait, hold on, take a picture of that again, because he was like holding it over the thing and you were hearing the LLM like get ahead of itself and he's like, hold on, he's telling it, hold on a second, wait a minute, go back and look at it again, now look at it. And I think that's much more impactful. If I'm, we've seen the slick Google videos. Apple makes these and then uses them directly out of these productions into their commercials, so they're getting more out of it. And I get that it becomes their commercial, like we saw at the end with the Apple iPhone at the end of the presentation. But I'm with you. It's like, yeah, that's all well and good, but this is AI, and anybody that's seriously looking into AI knows that you could fake anything you want. You could make anything look better than it really will be. And the problem with that is if you're showing almost zero latency in a highly produced video and then somebody gets it, yes, you may get zero latency when you're using the Apple side of Apple Intelligence. But the moment you need to do more complex things and use the ChatGPT side of it, or the Google, because I mentioned Google as well, when you have to use one of those sides of it, there's going to be a permission in there. I don't know if you'll be able to turn on all permissions always ever, or it's going to be more like ChatGPT when you use the open connections and it's like, do you want to proceed? Because that will slow down any conversation you're having. Is every time you start, hey, do you want to proceed? Because you're sharing data outside of the Apple ecosystem now. And that they want you to know that. I love Apple for, taking data security and our personal information seriously, but it also is going to impede a smooth use of it. And I'm not sure I totally understand how much of a roadblock that's going to end up feeling like. And like I said, this is a good time to like maybe bring in the Ethan Malik side of it. He got access a while ago, like, cause he was just referencing on LinkedIn maybe yesterday. But it was from a post earlier in August when he had gotten access to it. Now, whether again, was that an early beta version? Was that the full-fledged thing? I don't know. I don't know if he knows, but basically he said, what you're seeing is exactly what Apple said they were going to do, which is we're serious about protecting your data. Whatever your opinion is on it, that's their line, right? They're going to take your personal information seriously and lock it down. But to do that means there's some consequences. You got to give up some things in order to make that work. And so Siri will be interesting to see how it's a collaboration between the two. Hey, Siri, go update my calendar, or look at the one they showed was like, when is my mom's flight arriving, and it pulled it from I think the text messages and then searched it and then provided an answer. That's pretty easy, right? That's something we would expect to use on a phone just with a good voice command. But then going beyond that, the things that we know you would have to use a larger language model for, ChatGPT, something like that. That's where I'm curious. Does it feel seamless, or does it feel like, stop, you're leaving the Apple ecosystem? Do you agree? Yep, I agree, because I need this information, and then we proceed forward to it. So I think that's the part I'm most interested about, is that user experience. While I also get that Apple had to make some concessions, they had to in order to do it. They could have, but they didn't want to just open this up to everybody where you didn't really understand as the user when your information was passing through Apple and leaving your device and when it wasn't. I think it's a tough situation, but it'll be interesting to see what the user experience is. What are your guys' thoughts on it?
It's true. And in fact, that's one of the frustrating things I think that we found with GPT Actions, which we did a show on recently. That for me, one of the reasons that GPT Actions are intermittent in success is the timeout factor. Right? So it's asking me, it needs to ask me first, and then it's going to initiate the action. And then sometimes that action times out, so it doesn't actually do it. And if we're adding an extra step to this, so that now it's Siri, and is that going to go to GPT to do that? Like, I'm curious about what that process is when it says it's going to leave the device. They also said something about leaving the device, and that there's a privacy element in their personal cloud, your personal cloud part of their cloud section, and that your personal data doesn't ever leave. So I don't know, there's some sort of masking process that happens maybe before it goes out, and then a function happens and then it comes back. Yeah, unless they're using their own proprietary in the cloud learning models, I have some concerns about the standard parameters that automatically have a time window that has to be completed within. What does anybody else think? Andy, we got a question for you too. Kusha. Oh, there you go.
Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. There was a separate. I'm sorry. There was one more there. This is the one that has specifically says I want an answer from Andy. So
There we go.
for it, Andy. You're on mute.
You are muted.
I try to be mute to save us from all the noise in my environment. Okay, so the A18 is definitely a similar but improved chip, and it is a new chip. It's not a renamed chip. They're both 6-core CPU. They run at approximately the same clock speed. This 15% improvement is what's claimed for the A18. So it's 15 to 20%. Some people say the neural engine, same 16-core neural engine. So they're very similar amount of memory, etc. But there's continuous refinement. And so there's about a 20% improvement, let's just say, that's available there.
All right.
So the power reduction, there was a power reduction, right? Improvement in power reduction. If power reduction can mean that my 15 doesn't overheat while I'm driving, yes, in the car, because that's the theme of Beth in the show today. Sorry, with GPS on, and all right, I probably have 15 other apps, but I'm not using the 15 other apps. It would be awesome if it would not overheat.
Your
because
15 overheats in the car just from that?
Yeah.
Wow.
The 8 Plus did not. Like, come on.
Yeah. I will say this. I have the 15 and I like you, I don't have the Pro. I have the 15, so I would have to upgrade in order to get Apple Intelligence. And I'll be honest with you, I probably will here in 3 days when you can do the pre-orders and stuff. I think they said generally these things will start shipping or be available in the store on the 20th. So not, 10 days from now. But anyway, my point to saying that was I generally just have not been that impressed with the 15. I could have easily just stayed with the 14 or 13, whatever I had before that, and been. I don't know that I honestly would have known any difference. The cameras are so good, unless to your point, Jimmy, you're doing the high end pro stuff, and there is some amazing stuff there with the cameras and all. But I'm not shooting like that, so that's fun. That would be fun tech for me, but it's not a day-to-day thing that I need to necessarily pay more for. The 15 just has been underwhelming to say the least. I mean, I could have just as easily skipped it. I will probably bump to a 16, or I know I will bump to the 16 because it's honestly not going to cost me any different to do it. Apple has their sort of, churn it out every year type program that you can do. And there's really no reason for me not to. And obviously if I gain the new core processor and Apple Intelligence off of that is going to be a benefit. I do think I'll actually use Siri more, no different than an Echo and who, if it starts becoming more helpful in my day-to-day life. I'm not against Siri. I've just never really used it because it's just never been. It's like a hey Echo, whatever, go, whatever it is. If it's like a simple task or whatever. I do know, and I've said this before, since my wife got the Apple Watch at Christmas, she uses it a ton more on her phone or watch. So I'll be interested too. Obviously, that won't. Well, hold on. No, because you're doing Siri directly on the watch, so you won't get any Apple Intelligence from the watch through the phone, right? Do I have that correct? If she had a 16 and her watch isn't going to use the Siri from the phone, correct?
I don't know. I think that's.
I think Siri's just on the running locally on the watch would be my thing, because sometimes her phone is nowhere near her and she's still able to use Siri. So I think that's right. I don't think it's pulling from the phone. So my take is that if you have a watch, you're not going to have Apple Intelligence on it. So I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, Beth, are you going to upgrade to a 16? I mean, never mind the overheating issue, but are you going to upgrade?
I am not thinking right now that I'm going to upgrade. I might do the watch, I had a watch a bunch of years ago and it was too thick for me. I would like to see, because this watch is thinner, whether that's something that will work for me. But I want to see. I'm not going to upgrade before iOS 18 comes out, and maybe the first update after iOS 18, because I don't want to break my phone that first week. But then I'll see. right? Like if I'm happy enough with what's happening, I don't need a new phone.
And they are encouraging that upgrade process. I mean, that's something they always do. But just a small blurb near the end was they said they'd give up to $1,000 credit for turning in your previous models, up to 12. So I'm sure that depends on the quality or condition and stuff
I
like
can tell
that.
you I have a 128 gig iPhone 15 and the trade-in was $499. That's on the Apple store right now.
Yeah.
So
No, they said it in the announcement. So
yeah, I'm just telling you what
Yeah.
I would get if I tried to trade it in. It would be about $500 for it, but it is the lowest. It's not a Pro Max. It's not. It's like it's the lowest model and the smallest memory, I believe. So a base 15 was like
And-
$499.
And I have the largest model and the highest memory. And yours is $499. Is that what you said?
Mine was, yeah. But you can check it. By the way, you can check
Yours
anytime you want on
$499?
the Apple Store app.
Mine is $150 more. I get $151 more for spending way more money when I bought it.
Yeah, for sure.
Is yours a 15 too?
Mine's a 15 Pro Max. Yep.
Yours
And
a 15 Pro Max. Mine's a 15 Pro. Yeah. Although, like, outside of the intelligence stuff, like, the only thing that I'm thinking, even remotely, anyone who has like anything maybe 13 and above, if you really, 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 really want, is that like little like camera thing on the side of the if you use your phone. I mean, if you use your phone as a camera like a lot. But remember, I think what we have in our pockets now is literally a camera that just happens to take calls. Like that's what this whole thing is. It's a really good camera, does a bunch of stuff for us, and it just happens we can take calls, but you can actually take calls with WhatsApp. So yeah.
Over Wi-Fi. And you've been able to do that, by the way. I took calls on my iPod in Iraq via, I used to call my wife via the iPod in Iraq over Wi-Fi, and that was
crazy.
2009.
Yeah.
So this has been around, like to your point, that tech has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
It's gotten better, but I was able to sit outside on the benches and call her from there.
That's awesome.
It was a cool workaround back then. Okay, so look, we were kind of getting on time or whatever, but I'd love to hear from everybody else. Jimmy, I don't know if do you have an iPhone right now?
Nope. I was supposed to. I promised myself that I would buy an iPhone as soon as they added USB-C as the primary connector. That came out with the 15.
Yeah.
So that is on my task list. It won't be the 15 now because they just came out with a new one.
Right.
They'll just keep on coming out each year until I can pick one up. But it did make me think about really quickly about why they made that jump for the chip. I mean, it's a new chip and everything, like Andy said. But it's a great move for their marketing team, because now every year when they come out with a new chip, it matches their new iOS that comes out, right? So next year will be iOS 19 and chip 19. See, easy peasy.
I didn't even think about that. You're probably right. Okay, so you don't have it. Andy, I want to ask you, but also, Andy, you've got my head buzzing about the whole thing with the classes. I don't know. I think maybe that's a whole other show. Here's the reason why, because I love what you just talked about. Like, they're going to have you on all moving parts. And I was like, oh my God, he's right. Because like you would have it like so smoothly too. Apple's just so smooth with this over time. It's like all of a sudden it's integrated in your glasses. They clearly want you to have the earpods in all the time. The watch, they couldn't stop saying about it has to be dependable if you're never going to take it off. And I was like, oh my God, you're never going to take the watch off. And then they said in the iPhone part, and your iPhone's with you literally all the time. I'm like, damn it. So like they got me on all that. I don't have the glasses yet, but I don't have the earpods yet, but you're right. Like when you talked about that, and it made me think of this CNBC video I just watched about Rivian. And they were talking about how Volkswagen had invested $5 billion, which basically was going to save Rivian. And the reason I'm bringing this, I realize it doesn't sound like AI, is because Rivian is really like a software first company. And it was a cool video just talking about what Rivian did was they made basically a central brain. Let's make it really simple, as opposed to all these electronic control units, ECUs, all over the car, like 77 of them. Like, oh, I wanted heated seats. That's a new thing. And these legacy car owners had to try to make all these like 77 different computers and none of them talk to each other. Teslas and the Rivians are software first, right? So they built from that. And it's what made me think about what you said, Andy, about the idea of like Apple. It really is a central processing, right? It's the same software, and they're now taking inputs from all these different areas, your heart rate, they're going to what you can see out of your glasses, how you're hearing, what the sounds around you are, everything that we already know you can do with a phone, from the pedometers and the, you know, being able to track how fast you're moving and speed and all these things. It makes me wonder, and maybe this is a great topic for another show, of like, what does that future state look like when AI and these devices are connected to us in many, many more ways than they ever have been before. So I don't know if anybody else thinks that sounds like a cool idea, but Andy's got my head.
I'll just say that it's it's the framework for the ultimate personal super intelligent assistant. That super intelligence needs to have many sensors, has to have data, right? It's going to collect data, and it has to collect that longitudinally. So it knows where you are, GPS on the phone and the watch. It knows what your movements are. It can actually ultimately figure out what's the gait changes that are happening in your body, like over time as a result of, I know you normally keep the phone in your pocket and your watch is here, and the earbuds now are tracking your head movements, and it's interpreting all of those interactively. I mean, there's so many possibilities when you have so many sensors on the same person over so much time. And that can be used along with all the access to the data of all your communications. There's your super assistant.
And so, Andy, my question to you is: do you have an iPhone, and if so, would you upgrade because of what you saw yesterday?
Well, I have the iPhone 15 Pro Max like Beth, so I don't need to upgrade to the 16. Yeah. It doesn't have a lot more. I do snap photos with my camera, but I'm not a photographer on the iPhone. So I would like to have the visual intelligence of the new camera capabilities. I believe that some of the tools that you saw where you can, use the AI component of Apple Intelligence to do interpretation of things coming from the camera, I think that'll be available on the iPhone 15 Pro.
Yeah. What, Beth? You're on mute. Nothing? No?
I am crossing fingers. I also am not a photographer, and so if you could just give me the grid of the of the thirds, or this is what it's going to look like if you post it on Instagram, that would be super helpful.
Yeah.
Well, they did post that. They are putting in the grid features,
which is why,
for the Pro. Yeah, totally.
I'm with Andy. Like, can that just come for us too? Like, that's not camera based. That's software based.
Yeah, right. There's no reason it can't. It should be, I want to get Carl's last thoughts on this and then we'll wrap it up. But it should be noted too that for anybody, because we do have people in the comments who are like, oh, I didn't get to see the event yesterday. Here's what you do need to know as far as the Apple Intelligence. Okay, you get the brand new iPhone 16 on the 20th. You go to the store in 10 days, you have it in your hand. You will not have Apple Intelligence at that time. So they made it pretty clear that these things will be rolling out. They did not give specific dates. Some of it sounded much more like in the next month. There were some big updates coming. If you don't natively speak English, you may have to wait a little bit longer for things to roll out in your native English or regional English, or places like Australia. For Aaron, who always talks about how the LLMs AI doesn't really get the Australian accent a lot of times. He's talked about that several times. So anyway, these Apple Intelligence features will be rolling out over time, but anybody who's upgrading, don't expect to see them on day one because they won't be there. So we'll all have to wait a little bit. And that's yet another reason, to your point, Beth, why there's really no downside for waiting. If you didn't want to upgrade to the 16, wait and see how good it is before, especially if you have a 15, that makes a Pro Max, that totally makes sense. But if you have a 14, a 13, and you're like, is this the year I make the jump? I mean, really, there's almost no downside to just holding off and waiting for the Apple Intelligence to release. There will be 1,000 blogs, and we will talk about it on the show. You'll find out really quick whether the Siri functions are actually really good or not. Okay, Carl, last licks here.
Just last couple thoughts here. The first thing is, if you really, really want to upgrade and you really, really want Apple Intelligence, you just could download the developer beta and you'll get access to it. So you can get it before everyone gets it, and there's not much I guess so. But if you are interested in the Apple Intelligence itself, and you're in the 14, 13 range, I'd really highly recommend maybe waiting one more cycle, because the first cycle they're trying to figure all this stuff out. And I think because the developers they want to open it up to allow developers to take advantage of it, you'll get another year where a lot of the apps are then starting to take advantage of it, which means you'll get like much better usage out of it rather than the first year where it's kind of clunky and there's not much related to it. I think that second cycle is probably better. And then the only thing is the thing that I'd be excited about, not anything to do with AI, would be the battery life. I think the battery life, if that was what they're looking at, 40% more, 30% more, I'm like, that's pretty impressive, which the battery life is actually pretty decent. But I think, with a Pro Max, I think your battery life is pretty good, isn't it? Is it pretty decent with Andy, Beth? Like, are they pretty good, like from a battery life perspective?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both are saying yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
we have shaking heads. Yeah. Yeah. Any other last thoughts, Carl, before we wrap it up?
Nope.
Okay. Listen, the rest of this week, we have the news tomorrow. There's some really interesting news coming out. If there's anything new about Apple, we'll certainly touch on that tomorrow. Really cool stuff that Beth brought up about Figure 1. So I really want to talk about that tomorrow, and sort of some back chatter we've had about that. So that'll be in the news tomorrow. Come back for that. On Thursday, we're going to be talking about Google Labs. If you haven't really dug into Google Labs, I highly recommend it, or wait for the show on Thursday and we'll do the digging for you and kind of show you what's in there. I've been using it for quite a while now, and there's some really cool AI innovations in there that I think will eventually make it into some of these mainstream apps that we use, or the Google mainstream, or maybe search. So we'll be talking all about that on Thursday. And then Friday, we're going to be doing our honest review of Replit Agent, Replit Agent, and talk about the coding. We talked about Cursor last week. This week, we're going to talk about Replit, what we like, what we don't like, how easy is it for non-coders like me, how easy is it for people who actually know their way around some code and some Python and things like that. So that's what we got coming up the rest of this week. Be sure you come back. Don't forget, you can go to thedailyAIshow.com. You can get access to all our previous ones. You can reach out to us if you're looking for help in your own business when it comes to AI and AI strategies. And of course, you can sign up for the newsletter that comes out every Sunday. It's free. It has a whole bunch of good additional information beyond these live shows. So I highly recommend you doing that. That list is growing quick. So jump on the bandwagon and see what you think. You can always unsubscribe, right? So, but you won't. You won't unsubscribe. All right. That's it for today, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Until then, bye.
Aloha.